Attention everyone, there is a high urgency for this video because there are currently multiple vocal tuning plugins for sale right now. Some of you might wonder if they are worth it. I am personally someone who always loved vocal tuning plugins or vocoders and stuff like that, so I think that I have some sort of competence in this topic. I have used them a lot. In this video we are going to make even a blind test between these plugins and a discussion about the features and the sound quality and everything. I will also show you some tricks that I personally like to use in these contexts. There will be free plugins and paid ones in this video. So let's get started. Alright, so first of all I want to tell you that today I'm going to use this cheap ass dynamic mic instead of my good mic because we are testing vocal tuning plugins and there are often used in a very casual setting, and later there will also be a little bit of a latency test, so I just try to keep it real here and use a crappy mic. With that out of the way, let's introduce the commercial plugins that are part of this test. As you can already see, Autotune Access 10, 50 euro, well, euro, dollar, that's basically the same, and also 1 year of Autotune Essentials. If you know me, then you know that I'm usually very critical and skeptical about Autotune's price policy because most of the plugins just cost several hundred euro only so that you can get a plugin that sounds like Autotune, while other plugins that are way cheaper also exist, you know? So the big question is always, is it worth it? Does the iconic sound of this plugin that has shaped so many tracks justify that the lack of features in this plugin is just enormous? We'll get to that later. But first of all, let me give you a little bit of my opinion about subscription services, because I want to make one thing clear, which is that the subscription of Autotune Essentials is definitely not part of the deal for me. This is just not to be considered. And I have 3 reasons for that. Reason number 1 is, in the long run, if you keep your subscription, you lose more money than if you had just bought the plugin once. So you definitely lose more money than when you are just buying a plugin, unless you stop the subscription at some point. And that brings me to point 2, which basically goes like this. You try to open an old session and it doesn't work anymore because you don't have the subscription anymore, or you just remember the plugin and feel nostalgic and you just want to use it again, and then, oh no, I ran out of the subscription 2 months ago or whatever. Doesn't work. Reason number 3, subscription services make you feel guilty about not using the plugins, and I think that's the worst part about it. I mean, imagine you are in a session right now and you always have some brain cells in the back of your mind that say something like, oh, you know, you have to use this plugin again, or else it is not worth that you actually pay for it right now in this moment. And then you just have to make decisions based on money instead of based on what the music actually asks for. And you know, I cannot describe how much that sucks. That just sucks on such a major level. I am running out of words for that. So let's not consider Autotune Essentials here. Let's just consider Autotune Access. Now here we have something that is on the complete other side of the spectrum. Brainworks Crispy Tuner, which is currently for sale, 30 euro instead of 400, and only for the next 50 hours. And it has a lot of features, like you can see a Formant shift control, different types of retune speed, not even just 2 but 3 types, and the graphical mode, like just the big versions of Autotune have. So when we compare this to Autotune Access, like, we know that this has more features, but it's cheaper, at least right now. Well, you know, Brainworks, they are in some way a little bit like Waves. They constantly make these sales, so you cannot really take the full price seriously. The plugins are not meant to be bought at the full price, and the full price is just unreasonable as fuck. But just considering that this is 30 euro, like at least once per year, already makes it considerable that this is to be treated the natural price. Even though I would say this plugin should definitely be priced a little bit higher, like way higher actually, but not 400. Oh, and by the way, thanks for the people in my Discord group for always giving me these nice little suggestions. Without you, I wouldn't have figured out that I have to check out Crispy Tuner right now, and then this test wouldn't contain this plugin, which would be a real shame, I think. So if you are also enthusiastic about VST plugins, not just mine, but like VST plugins in general, then please come to my Discord and let's have a good time. I would really appreciate it. You find the link to my Discord group in the description of this video. Checking out how purchasable plugins perform is all fun and games, but a lot of you might also wonder what are the free alternatives, and I can tell you there is Kirui by G2000 Kilograms, there is Greylon 2 by Auburn Sounds, and there is M Auto Pitch by Melda Productions, and they are also part of the blind test. Let me show you part of the song that I'm testing the plugins with before we go to the blind test. So now we are going on with the blind test, and I have to say a few words before we get started with it. It will work like this. I will only show you a letter of the plugin that currently represents the sound, and there will be the letters A to F because we have 5 plugins, and I will switch between those. So you don't know which plugin is which, and you can just think to yourself things like, which of these might be autotune, which of these is the iconic autotune sound, or like the other ones, which of these is Kirowi, which of these is Greylong. Can you actually recognize that? That might be an interesting question, and you can let me know about that in the comments below after the blind test. Or like, which sound do you like most is also an interesting question, because you might not be interested in the iconic sound but just in the best sound for the given material. Might also be. And also I want to tell you that there are a few plugins in the chain after the tuning, so this is the part where the tuning happens. So yeah, one might argue that a blind test works better when you know the plugin is just an isolated test case, just the plugin and nothing else that could diffuse the results. But I have to say that I want to make it more of a realistic blind test. Like, what does the difference sound like on a track with processing that you would actually choose for that track in that context to that beat. So I will use the same settings for all of these plugins, except that I will change up the vocal tuning plugins. And I hope that this is a good blind test that makes everyone happy. Let's get started.
Darum jagen sie mich seither jeden Tag, schwingen ihr Reagenzglas überm Kopf mit Question Marks, fragen, wie kannst du nur so abjagen? Hör doch auf mit diesem Quark, beantworte, wenn ich dich frag. Darum jagen sie mich seither jeden Tag, schwingen ihr Reagenzglas überm Kopf mit Question Marks, fragen, wie kannst du nur so abjagen? Hör doch auf mit diesem Quark, beantworte, wenn ich dich frag. Darum jagen sie mich seither jeden Tag, schwingen ihr Reagenzglas überm Kopf mit Question Marks, fragen, wie kannst du nur so abjagen? Hör doch auf mit diesem Quark, beantworte, wenn ich dich frag.
So now it's time for the discussion. It's time for you to write your comments. You will get the results, which plugin was which, at the end of the video, but first of all I want to know what you think. Could you hear the difference between the vocal tuners? What was the difference like? What kind of sensation did it give you? Which one was which? Which one was autotune especially, or crispy tuner? How big was this difference? Was it remarkable or was it subtle? What was your favorite sound? Let me know about all of these things if you like to. Alright, so now I decided to make a comparison of the plugins where you can actually see the plugins. So now it's no blind test anymore. Now we are looking at plugin interfaces. And I decided to point out criteria that I just decided to be interesting for vocal tuning plugins. And I will tell you what these are. First of all, I want to discuss the scale finder workflows, like how to find the scale of the song. Then I want to test the latency, because a lot of times when you're using autotune plugins in a cautious context, you're just holding a mic in your hand and you just throw autotune on it while you're recording already, maybe even reverb and delay and stuff just to get into the vibe. This is a crucial aspect of vocal tuning plugin, in my opinion, especially the real-time ones. Like, I wouldn't expect that from Melodyne, of course. Now, next up, we have a little bit of a niche topic like MIDI support. It can matter if you just want to have a little bit finer control and if you like working with MIDI. Then we're going to talk about Formant control, because everyone loves vocal chops and Formanty modulation and stuff. Of course, we will talk about the sound quality itself, like How much does it matter to have the iconic sound? And what about the other sounds? Do they have something cool to them as well? And then there will also be some more optional topics like graph mode. How usable is it? What can you do with it? And also I want to talk about harmonizer features and sound design stuff that might not be interesting for everyone who uses such plugins, but I think it's kind of a cool topic. And at the end, I compare the prices as well in regard to all the findings that we have had in the meantime. Alright, let's start with the criteria of finding the scale. Most autotune-ish plugins like Kirui just have a few buttons where you can input the pitch classes that are part of your scale, and at some point you have inputted so many of them that it even shows you which scale it is, and then you can also use the drop-down menu to just select a different scale like that, and that's also a nice feature. Some people might work with samples where the name of the scale is already part of the file, but I like that you can also type it in on the buttons, because then you can just compose something without knowing what the scale is and then just be like, okay, what kind of notes do I have? I have a D, I have A and A sharp, I have G, I have F, do I have E somewhere? Maybe I do, and maybe C would also make sense, and then suddenly you know, okay, this must be an F major scale. Nice. Graylon has the same workflow, so this would be C major in Graylon. This workflow is not perfect because it doesn't give you the drop-down menu, so you don't have the other workflow, but I like that you can just type in the notes. That should be, you know, the least common denominator of a scale finding feature in a vocal tuning plugin. Now let's check out auto pitch, in which you can also just type in the scale like this, and then you have F major, and then it shows you the keys, but you can also click on the keys yourself to change what the scale consists of. Will it update which scale it shows here actually when I'm doing that? Like if I build a new scale, this should be C major now. It doesn't show me that, but you know, at least you have both workflows, which is kind of cool. Now, any normally thinking human being would think that a commercial plugin that is pretty expensive has the same features. However, reality strikes, because when you load up Autotune Access, then you have only the drop-down menu. So you have to know what the scale is like. Even though there's kind of a remove notes feature, it basically just says remove notes on top of what the scale already removed. So I can say, okay, I'm in C major, but I don't want to use A on this huge keyboard. It is just like saying, fuck you, customer, buy the more expensive version of Autotune. You are not worth a totally reasonable feature that is not hard to implement. You know, 50 euro is still 50 euro, and I think that Antares should be more respectful about that. Now we are here in Crispy Tuner, and you can see you can select a scale like F major, and it will show you the results, and you can make up your own scale. Doesn't show you correctly what the scale is like, so that it automatically updates the drop-down menu. That is only a thing in Kirui, which makes Kirui the oldest of plugins and the cheapest of plugins. Basically have the best scale finding workflow. For this test, I've turned down the latency of my sound card to the lowest latency possible, and you can see the test setup is just the different vocal tuning plugins that we will cycle through, as well as a compressor to just make the vocals come through nice with the beat. And stuff. The interesting part about this test is how well do these plugins perform live, because you know, when you're using plugins like this, you likely do that because you already want to have the right vibe while recording, so latency matters a lot. As you can see, Kirui is already enabled. I have a C major scale, no fancy settings, and it has a latency of 16 milliseconds. Yeah, let's just record something and see what happens. I didn't prepare any lyrics for that. Let's get started with okay, I turned off. Whoa, I don't hear myself anymore. That's weird. Now let's listen to the recording. Yeah, I didn't prepare any lyrics for that. So as you can hear, this is basically almost tight, even without trying very hard. So Kirui definitely has a latency that is okay for a plugin. I can tell you from experience, as someone who has used Kirui a lot, that sometimes I could hear the latency a little bit, and it can get slightly annoying sometimes. So I hope that we get some better results on the other plugins. So it has to be better than 16 milliseconds. Let's keep that in mind. So next up we have Graylon, which has twice as much latency. That also correlates to my intuition, because I always felt like Graylon is a little bit sloppy. I don't know, let's just record something new and find out if it still comes out tight when you play it back. Let's find out if this stuff that I'm singing is tight.
because I don't know, no.
Playback.
Let's find out if this stuff that I'm singing is tight, because I don't know, no.
Okay, I think that wasn't quite tight, so I did struggle a little with keeping the tightness where it should be with this plugin, because it has twice as much latency. So you cannot really feel what it will sound like when the latency compensation kicks in again at playback. That can be problematic, and I think that's a major reason why a lot of rap nowadays also doesn't sound very tight, because people just record stuff with their auto-tune-ish plugins, but then don't fix the timing that it's introduced. Alright, so next up we check out M Auto Pitch, and it has around the same latency as Greylon, so we should expect something similar to happen. Let's go.
Should we expect something similar to happen, or does it feel vastly different? Let's find out, yeah.
You know, you have to take these kind of tests with a grain of salt, because my singing is not tight as fuck in the first place. So sometimes I might be a little bit biased in the way I judge this. But I do feel like M Auto Pitch and Greylon are a little bit problematic when it comes to this. Now we have Auto-Tune Access enabled, and it has a fantastic latency of only 2.5 milliseconds, which makes it just perfect for live situations. And I think if this is the secret magic that makes you have to pay some stuff for auto-tune, then maybe that alone makes it worth it. I don't know. Let's record something and see how tight that is.
Now that latency was not what I expected. That's pretty cool. Now that latency was not what I expected. That's pretty cool. So let's find out, how does it compare?
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I think it made a difference. Now it's time. What the fuck? Now that comes way too late. But there is a live mode. And now I enabled live mode. Ooh, that's better. But the live mode still has really long latency of 127 milliseconds. Now let's find out how that feels when recording stuff.
What the fuck, dude? This is the only plugin with the live mode. What the fuck, dude? This is the only plugin with the live mode.
Oh, okay. Oh. This has a terrible timing. So let's put that into mixing mode and see if that fixes it.
What the fuck, dude? This is the only plugin with the live mode.
Now that's kind of weird, because the live mode had a terrible latency, but still the recording that resulted in it sounded totally reasonable in mixing mode. I have no idea how they pulled that off, but I think the other plugins that are like that could definitely learn from it. I mean, Auto-Tune Access apparently doesn't need it because it only has 2 milliseconds of latency, but the other plugins that need a higher latency, they could have a mode like this to make it a little bit more reasonable for what these kind of plugins are useful for in general. So props to Brainworks for this creative solution to this command problem. We have a part here by my friend Felix. I asked him if he could contribute to this track with a part that I can slap different autotune plugins on. He actually used Kirui for recording this, and after recording this he also wrote a MIDI file which sometimes made the plugin do something different than what the scale already did on itself. So he gave me the MIDI file and his recording so that I can reproduce the same sound. We will apply it to all of the different vocal tuners right now.
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung herrscht Uneinigkeit über diesen Boy. Viel Geschrei. Alle Etablierten werfen mit ihren Thesen. Doch aus der arktischen Verbannung tritt ein alter Professor in den Saal hinein. Er ist fly. Er erforscht seit Jahrzehnten die verbotenen Lehren und er lädt alle Forscher in seine geile Zeit.
So first of all, we have to rule out which of the plugins actually support MIDI, and I decided to do that by adding a MIDI transpose into the chain that transposes all of the MIDI notes 2 octaves up, so that we can immediately hear when the plugin actually picks up the MIDI. So first of all, we have Auto-Tune Access.
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung.
Okay, so there are no octaves here, so Auto-Tune Access apparently has no MIDI input. Now we have Kirui.
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung.
We noticed Kirui does have the support for inputting MIDI. It also has an additional feature like the MIDI chord feature, and just to quickly explain it, in the MIDI chord feature you just give it a polyphonic input instead of a monophonic one like this, and the polyphonic input describes your scale. So then you can just turn off the scale and just use MIDI chord, and that way you can use Kirui even in a song that has a key change throughout the song. Also, the fact that you can turn off MIDI entirely is also really important, especially in regard to Bitwig, because in Bitwig, when there is some MIDI on some part of the chain, especially on synthesizers, that matters a lot, then it will be given to all of the upcoming plugins as well. And sometimes you just don't want the plugin to act on the MIDI, so it's good when the plugin lets you turn off the MIDI input. Now we have Greylon. Okay, so Greylon also lets you pitch the vocals with MIDI inputs. Now, one thing to note, both about Greylon and about Kirui, by the way, Formant preservation. You can turn off Formant preservation, and then it sounds like this. A vocal tuning plugin that tries to preserve the formants, tries to sound not so much Mickey Mouse as it would without preserving the formants, which is pretty cool. So you have to consider that I'm pitching it up 2 octaves now, so of course Greylon can barely do anything against it. Let's try just 1 octave. So you can hear it a little bit. It sounds a little bit less harsh when you have preserved formants dialed in. Let's also go back to Kirui. Here you just have a button that you can click or unclick, so there are no in-between values. So when it's turned on, you can hear there is Formant preservation, and I think in this plugin it works very well. Now let's go on to M-Auto Pitch.
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung herrscht Einigkeit über diesen Boy. Viel Geschrei.
It doesn't pick up the MIDI for some reason. It has utilities, map, and then there is MIDI in here, but I don't know what that means. I gotta say, Melder plugins have always confused me majorly, so maybe there is a MIDI input setting and you just have to enable that somewhere in the setting or so. I didn't find it, so I don't want to talk out of my ass. Maybe there is a feature, but if it is really there, then it should be more obvious where it is, because I couldn't find it. And now we have Crispy Tuner again.
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung herrscht Einigkeit über diesen Boy. Viel Geschrei.
So here's also MIDI input support and Formant preservation, which sounds pretty good. I would say it sounds even better than in Kirui, so that's pretty cool. Crispy Tuner and Kirui are the best plugins when it comes to MIDI support. Alright, so next up, let's talk about the Formant control specifically. So we can basically skip Autotune Access because they just decided to not even give you the slightest bit of this feature. But we can talk about Greylon, for example. Greylon has a little bit of Formant control because it has preserved formants, but apart from that, there is no Formant control. And basically all of the other plugins have pretty cool features when it comes to that. For example, let's look at Kirui, where you can just change the formant into both directions on both of its parallel layers. I really like the workflow of Kirui's Formant control, because something that I often like to do is transposing myself an octave up, turning off preserved formants, but then going down with it. I think I sound kinda cute like that, and I like that. Let's try the Formant control in Melder. Definitely a reasonable plugin for Formant shifts. And now let's check out Crispy Tuner again. Okay, so this is going to be the sound quality test, which is the most important one for many people, I think. And I want to start with M-Auto Pitch because I'm kind of biased about its sound quality. I always found that it was kind of whack. And I think a bias is confirmed again, because when I tried to apply it on my friend's vocal track, it just sounded like this.
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung herrscht Uneinigkeit über diesen Boy.
Let me turn off the effect entirely so that you can hear what the vocals actually sound like.
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung herrscht Uneinigkeit über diesen Boy.
So as you can hear, my friend didn't hit the right notes at all times, but it always went into the right direction. So any vocal tuning plugin should pick that up and just do the right thing. So whatever Melda is doing in this plugin, it is still the same as it was a lot of years ago when I last tried this plugin, and it should still be changed. Maybe I should tweak the detector to make it better, but I really don't want to. It should just work out of the box, I think. So next up we have Auto-Tune Access.
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung herrscht Uneinigkeit über diesen Boy. Viel Geschrei.
Does it sound different than Graylon?
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung herrscht Uneinigkeit über diesen Boy.
Well, maybe a little bit. Graylon sounds a little bit more nervous, I think. What does Kirui say?
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung herrscht Uneinigkeit über diesen Boy. Viel Geschrei.
Kirui sounds more solid than Graylon. That's something that I always felt like when I was comparing Graylon and Kirui myself privately. It is confirmed again. Kirui is just tighter than Graylon. Autotune is even tighter than Kirui. So now we have Brainworks.
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung herrscht Uneinigkeit über diesen Boy.
I also like the sound quality of Brainworks a lot. It has a little bit of these funky pitch fluctuations that you also hear in Autotune itself. But there is one part of this whole track where I can really hear the difference of the plugins, and I want to show you that. So there is this part of one of my vocal parts that sounds like this without vocal tuning effects. And you can hear on the gen of Fragen, I'm between the notes that should be played. And I actually made that with Melodyne. So I am here on the H, and there is no H in the scale. It's either C or A sharp. And I put it there on purpose so that the vocal tuning plugin can fluctuate on that note. And I wanted to find out which plugin does have the coolest fluctuations in a case like this. So here we have the original Autotune fluctuation, which I find just super pleasant. It's just the original Autotune fluctuation that just sounds super juicy. Then we have Kirui. Kirui just ignores the fact that this is on neither of these notes entirely and just decides to play A sharp, which is totally boring in this case, even though normally I love Kirui, but this was just such a boring decision of the plugin. Let's check out Graylon. So Graylon also added a nice pitch fluctuation on this thing, just like Autotune, and now M-Auto Pitch. M-Auto Pitch was a little bit different than the plugins before. It started with a pitch fluctuation, but at the end it settled for the C for a little bit of a time. So far everything was better than Kirui for this track. Now we have BX Tuner. How will BX Tuner tackle this issue? BX Tuner actually settles it in a similar way to M-Auto Pitch, and the sound character has a little bit of the sweetness of Autotune. So my personal conclusion to this test is Autotune just has the iconic Autotune sound, and you can always count on that sound being iconic and cool. BX Tuner has an incredibly nice sound as well. M-Auto Pitch unfortunately sometimes has you wondering why it doesn't work at all, but in many other times it does just work fine. And Kirui and Graylon, well, they have their problems. Kirui also sounds a little bit distorted at all times, but also they have their sweet spots.
Alright, so now we come to the criteria price. Now obviously the free plugins, they are just free, they have no price, so you can just get them and be happy about it. But you might want to know my opinion about the price of Autotune and Crispy Tuner. Autotune, well, it's still overpriced with 50 euro for something that basically cannot do anything interesting but having the iconic Autotune sound. But it is the iconic Autotune sound, I have to give them that. And sometimes I feel really happy about hearing these pitch fluctuations, so I will definitely not return this plugin. While I still wouldn't agree with this price, it is alright that I bought it. Crispy Tuner, however, this is just an insane deal, like 30 euro for something that basically has almost every feature in existence of vocal tuning. And it's like, even with a great sound quality, if someone had told me about that earlier, I think I wouldn't have bought Auto-Tune Access basically, because the difference is too marginal to me. You can see it however you want, but that's my opinion. 400 euro though, the full price. I don't know, like there are almost no plugins that are that expensive. What even costs 400 euros without a sale? I have really no idea. But yeah, 30 euro, definitely a no-brainer. One of the things that I was surprised about was, for example, that M-Auto Pitch can actually be pretty cool on a lot of tracks. I only had one track where the issue popped up that I could remember from like some years ago, but all of the other tracks were quite reasonable with it. So now I can understand why people always recommend it. The second thing that surprised me was that Kirui can actually be slower than Auto-Tune. I always perceived Kirui as an incredibly fast plugin, but I think I was fooled into thinking that from its low latency that set it apart from Greylon and some of the other plugins. When you're using it, you can feel that. So Auto-Tune is still the fastest plugin, and Kirui is nowhere near that fast, but also pretty fast. Now next up, I was surprised that Auto-Tune doesn't sound majorly different from the other plugins, except maybe Kirui due to its distorted sound. But you know, most of the time you have to listen very closely to actually hear the sweetness of Auto-Tune. And when you're listening closely, yeah, you can hear it. It is definitely there, and it has a special place in my heart, but it's not as noticeable as I thought it would be. And last of all, Crispy Tuner is sick as fuck. I have to be honest, when I started this test, I had the bias that this is going to be crappy because Brainworks is usually known for some analog emulations that I'm not interested in. But this one, it really adds something. It really adds something. And it's worth so much more than 30 Euro, so that surprised me.
Auf der jährlichen Versammlung herrscht Uneinigkeit über diesen Boy. Viel Geschrei. Alle Etablierten werfen mit ihren Thesen. Doch aus der attischen Verbannung tritt ein alter Professor in